So this was a revealing quote from Kevin Huerter, who was, he was on the Old Man and the Three podcast. That's with JJ Redick and Tommy Alter. And this was back on May 17th, a couple of days ago. And it was very interesting to read, what he had to say. I didn't listen to the podcast, but what he had to say about the Atlanta Hawks at the time. So here's his quote. Quote, "That was almost like the start of our downfall. Was the run that we went on. We won before we were expected to win, or before we should have. Let's call it. That just put a fast forward on our timeline, and I don't think our team as a whole was fully at that point." Now, the Hawks since then have gone 84 and 80. Quote, "The expectations for the team just went through the roof the next year because we made a conference finals. And it was conference finals or bust. And maybe as a unit, we weren't there yet." Now, interesting that he that he would say that, because look, we as fans, I don't know that everybody, like, I didn't have Eastern Conference Finals or bust, but the idea was to build off of what we had done in getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think that his point has some validity to it, that we all did put expectation on, okay, this is going to be the next great young franchise. Trae Young is the next great young superstar. Trae Young was the babe, the boy coming off that Eastern Conference Final. He could do no wrong. I mean, he was all of the flavor of the month and all these other kinds of, things that you would say about him. He was looked at in a totally different light coming off that Eastern Conference Finals run. He carried the team in a lot of ways. They had a good roster. They still had enough good young players, and Trae Young and John Collins and Kevin Huerter, right? You felt like that. And then they were fighting, obviously, injuries with Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter. So he definitely thought that they were a roster and a franchise that was on the rise, right? Up arrow for the Atlanta Hawks, because they got themselves into the 5 seed that year. And even though that they had the same record as the New York Knicks, that's why they ended up with the 5 seed, because the Knicks and Hawks had the 4th best record, but the head-to-head matchup put the Hawks at the 5 seed. So they technically did have a top 4 record in the Eastern Conference. They just, because of the head-to-head, got the 5 seed for it. But it is interesting to think about the idea of, did this team have too much expectation? And did ownership in the front office? Because think about it. Number one is, not only have they not capitalized on that Eastern Conference Finals run, but they have completely reorganized the organization as a whole. It's not just coach, it's general manager and president of basketball operations, and who the owner turns to, right? Having his son, Nick Ressler, in the fold now. Like, there were so many things that changed, that because they didn't capitalize on that run. Now, do I think that they were Eastern Conference Finals or bust? No, but certainly you would have thought, after coming off that kind of run, that a second round playoff series should have been the minimum expectation. Look, we've just talked about, what Quinn Snyder and the Hawks' expectation is. I think it's second round playoff, top 4 or 5 seed, because at some point, right, if you're going to be a championship caliber organization, if you're going to really contend for an NBA title, at some point there has to be a jumping on point, right? At some point that you have to figure some things out, and you have to be up arrow, and your franchise has to be going in a good direction. But maybe because these guys were so young when they did all of this, that it put an unrealistic expectation on them. Now, look, we wouldn't trade that Eastern Conference Finals run. That was arguably the best Hawks team we had seen in our lifetime, right? At least as far as from a success point. I mean, maybe not a talent standpoint, but from a success standpoint, that was arguably the team that went the furthest and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, they had gotten to, 2 games from being in the NBA Finals. So from a success standpoint, it was the best team ever. Don't know if it was from a talent standpoint their best team, but still, you would have thought that they would have at least built off of that run. Now, he goes on to say too, quote, I would say that team skipped a step and we overachieved for that year and we went on a great run. But ultimately, 2 years later, all these expectations that have happened, and everyone thought, all right, we're going to make a lot of changes because now we're failing as a team, when in reality, we might not have consistently built to that point anyway. And I think we were getting that. We were building. It just never came to fruition. I think there's a lot of truth in that. Now, do I think that the Hawks' downfall was that Eastern Conference Finals? I don't believe that. And I understand people who do. I can understand and sympathize with the idea of that the Eastern Conference Finals run may not have been a good thing in hindsight. But I wouldn't have traded that run for anything. I wouldn't have traded the run that they went on, beating Philadelphia, getting to the finals. That was an exciting series against Milwaukee, getting to within 2 games. Obviously, look, Trae Young steps on the referee's ankle and things change, right? Completely. Maybe the Hawks could have gotten themselves to the NBA Finals. Maybe they could have beaten that Phoenix team. I mean, it's a lot of what ifs and who knows. But still, I wouldn't trade that run for anything. But it is interesting that the Hawks have not built anything off of that. Now they've gotten rid of their coach. They've gotten rid of their GM, president of basketball operations. They've changed up, not their ownership group, but who the owner goes to. Now his son is in the mix and has influence. And now we've got new coach, GMs, assistant GMs. The whole organization has changed. And again, I don't blame all of this on, the expectations that were set, because look, you have to have expectations, right? You have to have some expectation. When you achieve success, you want to build off that success. The problem is that the bottom fell out of the organization. You went from Eastern Conference Final to barely making the play-in, and then a first-round exit where you were basically run off the court by the Miami Heat. I mean, it shouldn't have been that one extreme or the other. I can understand Kevin Huerter's point, but still, it should have been better than what it was that following season, where you were the 9 seed, barely got in the play-in, had to win 2 games, and then got blown out in, the Miami series 4-1, and didn't look good, in that series completely. So while I understand his point, it is an interesting one, but you still have to have expectations for what your franchise is going to be. And the fact is that they did not find a way to capitalize off of any success that they had. Look, it'd be one thing if they were just a second-round playoff team. Nate McMillan still may be here if they were a second-round playoff team after that year. He might have gotten a chance to coach a full year. And maybe in hindsight, it worked out that they went on that run and everything kind of gotten blown out, because I think the Hawks are in a better place now. They look at this roster and they kind of, okay, who can we build around? Who can we not build around? Quinn Snyder is now our head coach. We feel like there's some front office stability, albeit, again, we don't know what Nick Ressler's role is, or if Landry Fields is actually the guy calling the shots as far as personnel goes over Quinn Snyder. But maybe we'd come out better for all of it. Maybe, again, when you get high, you have to hit low to get back up and figure out where you are. But I wouldn't trade that Eastern Conference Finals run for anything. I certainly think that was a great thing for the city of Atlanta. That was a great thing for this franchise. The problem is that they just didn't build off of any of the expectations that we had. I don't think that they were Eastern Conference Finals or bust moving forward, but certainly they had to be better than what they were in that follow-up season, where they basically just fell flat on their face. And I'll tell you, the whole we don't care about the regular season coming off that Eastern Conference Finals run, I think that was their mindset, that, hey, we can just go on this run anytime we want. They found out that it wasn't that easy. And they found out that if you don't play during the regular season really well, that you're starting from a definite, low point, and just, you're behind the eight ball immediately in all this. All right, once you make Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen, make sure that you go into whatever platform that you're listening on and go into our comments section and let us know that you're an everyday listener. So we call them our everydayers. So we want you to be a part of our community. Obviously, subscribe to our channels, but let us know in the comments section of whatever platform you're on that you're an everyday listener, as we call them our everydayers. We thank you so much for being a part of our ever-growing community. And we thank you so much for being a part of this journey of Locked On Sports Network here in Atlanta.